Simone Carter had lived in Millbrook, Virginia her entire 28 years. It was the kind of small town that barely showed up on maps. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and secrets were impossible to keep. Population 3,214. One main street with a hardware store and a diner and a post office that closed at 3 in the afternoon, surrounded by farmland and forest and not much else. For most people who grew up in Millbrook, the goal was to leave as soon as possible, to escape to bigger cities with more opportunities and actual things to do. But Simone had never wanted to leave. She loved Millbrook with its slow pace and tight-knit community, loved knowing her neighbors and being part of something stable and permanent. After getting her degree in business and spending 2 years working in Charlotte, she had come home and opened Sweet Haven Bakery on Main Street, in the building that used to be her grandmother's flower shop. It was a small operation, just her and 2 part-time employees, but it was hers. She made cakes for weddings and birthdays, cookies for school fundraisers, bread that people drove from 2 towns over to buy. She knew her customers by name, knew their orders before they placed them, knew their families and their stories. Simone was beautiful in a way that made people look twice. She had rich, dark skin that glowed even under the fluorescent lights of her bakery. Natural hair that she wore in different styles every week, from box braids to a high puff to sleek buns, and eyes that were sharp and intelligent. She was curvy in a way she had learned to embrace after years of fashion magazines trying to tell her she should be smaller, and she had a smile that could light up a room when she chose to use it. She was also stubborn as hell, independent to a fault, and had very clear ideas about what she wanted from life. A husband was not currently on that list. She had dated here and there over the time, after years. Nothing serious. The pickings were slim in Millbrook, and most of the men she had grown up with were either already married or still acting like they were 19. She was content with her life as it was, focused on building her business and taking care of her mother who lived in the house. Simone had grown up in 3 blocks from the bakery. If love happened, great. If not, she was perfectly fine on her own. That was her mindset on the Tuesday morning when Dante Moretti walked into Sweet Haven Bakery and changed everything. Simone was behind the counter, putting the finishing touches on a 3-tier wedding cake for the Murphy wedding that weekend, when the bell above the door chimed. She glanced up automatically with her customer service smile in place and felt her brain stutter to a halt. The man who had just walked in was not from Millbrook. That much was immediately obvious. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, perfectly tailored to a fine body that was tall and powerfully built. He had dark hair that was styled with expensive product, olive skin, and a face that was striking in a harsh, masculine way. But it was his eyes that really caught her attention, dark and intense and currently focused on her with an attention that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. Behind him came 2 other men, also in expensive suits, also carrying themselves with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about being challenged. They flanked the first man like bodyguards, which sent alarm bells ringing in Simone's head. This was not a normal customer stopping in for a muffin and coffee. "Can I help you?" Simone kept her voice pleasant but cool, her instincts telling her to be careful. The man in the center stepped up to the counter, and Simone noticed he moved with a predatory grace that was both attractive and slightly terrifying. "I hope so," he said, and his voice was deep with an accent she could not quite place. "Italian, maybe? I am looking for the owner of this establishment." "That would be me." Simone straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated in her own space. "Simone Carter, what can I do for you?" His eyes swept over her face, and something flickered in his expression that she could not read. "Miss Carter," he said slowly, like he was tasting her name. "I am Dante Moretti. I am in town on business, and I have heard that your bakery makes the best cakes in Virginia. That's very flattering, but I don't know who told you that. We're just a small-town bakery." Simone was already suspicious. How did this man even know about Millbrook, let alone her bakery? "I have my sources." Dante's smile was slight and did not reach his eyes. "I would like to place an order. A large one. I am hosting an event next month, and I will need desserts for 200 people. Can you handle that?" Simone blinked. That was by far the biggest order she had ever received. 200 people? What kind of event? "A business function." Dante pulled out a business card and slid it across the counter. "My contact information. I will pay whatever you ask, and I will need a tasting scheduled as soon as possible so we can decide on the menu." Simone picked up the card. It was heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. Dante Moretti. It read, CEO, Moretti Enterprises. There was a phone number and an email address, both with a New York area code. She looked back up at him, her suspicion deepening. Why would someone from New York come all the way to rural Virginia for desserts? There were probably 500 bakeries closer to him that could handle an order like this. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Moretti, but I am not sure I am the right fit for your event. I mostly do local orders, nothing on this scale. Maybe you should try someone in Richmond or D.C. I do not want someone in Richmond or D.C. Dante's voice was firm. I want you. I have done my research, Miss Carter. Your bakery has excellent reviews, your creativity is unmatched, and I trust that you can deliver what I need. There was something in the way he said I want you that made Simone's skin prickle with awareness. This was not just about cake. She did not know what it was about, but her instincts were screaming that accepting this order would be a mistake. I am going to have to decline, she said, keeping her voice professional. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I am not equipped to handle an order of that size. I am sure you will find someone else who can help you. For a long moment, Dante just looked at her. She saw surprise flicker across his face, followed quickly by something that looked like intrigue. His two companions shifted behind him, clearly not used to hearing their boss be told no. You are certain? Dante asked. I am willing to pay triple your normal rate. I am certain. Thank you for stopping by. Simone gave him a smile that said the conversation was over and turned back to her wedding. Cake. Dismissing him. She heard him leave, heard the bell chime as the door opened and closed, and let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That was weird. She put the business card in the trash and tried to forget about Dante Moretti and his strange request. But Dante Moretti was not a man who was easily forgotten or easily dismissed. Over the next week, he came back to Sweet Haven 3 more times. Each time he made the same request, each time he offered more money, and each time Simone turned him down. She could not explain why she kept refusing him, why she felt such a strong instinct to keep him at a distance. It was not the money, which was admittedly tempting. It was something about him, something dangerous and consuming in the way he looked at her, that made her want to run. On his 4th visit, he changed tactics. Instead of asking about the catering order, he simply ordered a coffee and a slice of lemon cake and sat at one of the small tables by the window. He did not bring his bodyguards this time. He just sat there for an hour, working on a laptop, occasionally looking up to watch Simone as she served customers and worked behind the counter. It should have felt creepy. Instead, it felt electric. This awareness of him in her space. His eyes on her whenever she moved. Simone tried to ignore him, tried to focus on her work, but she found herself hyper-aware of every move she made, every word she spoke to customers. When he finally left, leaving a $100 bill for a $7 order, she felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. This became his new pattern. Every afternoon for the next 2 weeks, Dante would come into Sweet Haven, order something small, and sit at the same table for an hour or 2. He never bothered her while she was working, never made inappropriate comments, never did anything that would give her a legitimate reason to ask him to leave. He just existed in her space, a constant reminder that he was there, that he was interested, that he was not giving up. And slowly, against her better judgment, Simone started to look forward to seeing him. She started to notice things about him. The way he always said please and thank you to her employees. The way he left generous tips that sometimes exceeded the cost of his order. The way he spoke Italian on the phone in a voice that was somehow even more attractive than his English. The way he looked at her, not with the leering attention she got from some men, but with genuine interest and something that looked almost like reverence. They started to talk on his visits. Small conversations at first, about the weather or the cake he was eating or the town itself. Then, deeper conversations. He asked about her business, seemed genuinely interested in how she had started it and what her goals were. He asked about her life in Millbrook, about her family, about what she did for fun in a town this small. And slowly, carefully, he shared things about himself too. She learned that he had been born in Sicily and had come to America when he was 12. She learned that he ran a business empire that spanned multiple industries, though he was vague about the specifics. She learned that he was 35, had never been married, and was close to his mother who still lived in New York. She learned that beneath the dangerous exterior was a man who was intelligent and well-read and surprisingly funny when he wanted to be. And Simone felt herself starting to fall, which terrified her more than anything else. She did not do this, did not let herself get swept up by charming men who appeared out of nowhere. She was practical and careful, and not the type to lose her head over a handsome face and an Italian accent. But something about Dante pulled at her, made her want to know more, made her want to let her guard down. It was 3 weeks after his first visit when he finally made his real move. Simone was closing up the bakery for a night, wiping down the counters and putting away the last of the day's inventory, when Dante appeared at the door. She had locked it already, but she found herself unlocking it and letting him in, her heart beating faster than it should. "I am sorry to bother you after hours," he said, "but I wanted to speak with you privately." "About the catering order?" Simone asked. "Because my answer has not changed." "No, not about that." Dante moved closer, and Simone found herself backing up against the counter, not out of fear but because the intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. "About us. Us. There is no us, Mr. Moretti. You are a customer who comes into my bakery. That is all. That is not all, and you know it." Dante's voice was rough. "For 3 weeks, I have been coming here, spending time with you, trying to show you that I am serious. Do you think I do this for every woman I meet? Do you think I have ever pursued anyone the way I have pursued you? I did not ask you to pursue me." Simone's voice was shaky. "I told you no the first day you walked in here. You are the one who decided to ignore that. Because I saw you and I knew." Dante reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. "I knew that you were different. That you were what I have been looking for without even realizing I was looking. You are intelligent and strong and beautiful, and you have built something here with your own hands that you should be proud of. You are extraordinary, Simone, and I want you in my life." Simone's breath caught at his words, at the sincerity in his voice. "You do not even know me," she managed. "Then let me know you. Have dinner with me. Let me take you somewhere nice, away from this town where everyone is watching. Let me show you that I am more than just some man who walked into your bakery with a strange request." Simone knew she should say no. Every logical part of her brain was screaming at her to maintain boundaries, to protect herself, to not get involved with someone who was clearly dangerous in ways she did not fully understand. But there was another part of her, a part she usually ignored, that wanted to say yes, that wanted to see where this could go, wanted to take a risk for once in her carefully controlled life. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "That is all I am promising." The smile that spread across Dante's face was brilliant, transforming his harsh features into something almost boyish. "One dinner is all I am asking for. Tomorrow night, I will pick you up at 7. He left before she could change her mind, and Simone stood in her empty bakery wondering what she had just agreed to and whether she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The next evening, Dante picked her up in a car that was worth more than her bakery, probably more than her house. It was a sleek black luxury vehicle with leather seats and a driver who nodded respectfully as he opened the door for her. Simone had dressed carefully, choosing a dress that was elegant but not too formal, her hair in a twist-out that framed her face perfectly. She had spent an hour on her makeup, which was unusual for her, and she had changed her outfit 3 times before settling on this one. Dante looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You look stunning," he said simply, and the heat in his eyes made her feel beautiful in a way she had not felt in years. They drove to Richmond, to a restaurant that required reservations months in advance, the kind of place Simone had only read about in magazines. The maitre d' greeted Dante by name and led them to a private table in the back where they would not be disturbed. Over the course of 3 hours, they talked about everything and nothing. Dante was charming and attentive, asking her questions and listening to her answers like they were the most important things he had ever heard. He told her stories about growing up in Sicily, about the family he had left behind, about building his business from nothing. He also, slowly and carefully, started to hint at what his business actually was. He did not say he was in the Mafia, did not use those words, but he talked about family organizations and business territories and handling problems that required discretion. He made it clear without explicitly stating it that he operated outside the law, that he was dangerous, that his world was not safe. Simone should have run, should have ended the date right there and gone home and never spoken to him again, but instead, She found herself asking questions, wanting to understand him, wanting to see past the criminal to the man underneath. And what she saw was complicated. Yes, Dante did illegal things. Yes, he was dangerous. But he also operated by a code, protected the people who worked for him, supported the communities where his businesses operated. He was not a good man by society's standards, but he was not entirely bad, either. I am telling you these things because you deserve to know who I am, Dante said at the end of the evening. If you want to walk away now, I will understand. I will leave Millbrook, and you will never see me again. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to explore this connection between us, then you need to understand what you are getting into. My life is complicated and sometimes dangerous. I have enemies. I have responsibilities that I cannot walk away from. But I promise you that if you choose me, I will protect you with everything I have. You will never have to fear anything, because I will make sure of it. Simone looked at him across the table, at the intensity in his eyes and the vulnerability beneath the tough exterior. She thought about her safe, predictable life in Millbrook, her bakery and her routines, and her mother's warnings to always play it safe. She thought about how she had spent 28 years being careful, being practical, never taking risks or letting herself want things that seemed impossible. And then she thought about how she felt when Dante looked at her, like she was someone extraordinary. She thought about the electricity between them, the way his presence made her feel more alive than she had felt in years. She thought about the possibility of having something more than her comfortable, lonely existence. I am not walking away, she heard herself say. Not yet. I want to see where this goes. The relief and joy on Dante's face was worth every ounce of fear she felt. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. You will not regret this, Tesoro. I promise you that. Over the next 3 months, Simone fell in love with Dante Moretti. It was not a slow, gentle fall. It was intense and consuming, and unlike anything she had ever experienced. Dante courted her with a single-minded focus that was both overwhelming and intoxicating. The flowers started arriving the Monday after their first date. Not a standard bouquet from the local florist, but an elaborate arrangement of deep purple orchids mixed with white roses, delivered by a courier from Richmond. The card simply said, "Thinking of you, D." Her employees, Michelle and Tara, practically swooned when they saw them, and by lunchtime, half of Main Street had found an excuse to stop by the bakery to get a look at the mysterious flowers. By Friday, there were 3 more arrangements strategically placed around the bakery, each one more stunning than the last. Simone tried to tell Dante it was too much, that she did not need grand gestures, but he just smiled and said, I like seeing you surrounded by beautiful things. It reminds me that you deserve beauty in your life. Their second date was to a concert at the Kennedy Center in D.C. Simone had never been, had only seen pictures of the beautiful venue with its crystal chandeliers and red carpets. Dante arranged everything, sending a car to pick her up, having a dress delivered to her house that fit her perfectly, a deep emerald green that made her skin glow. When she asked how he knew her size, he just said, I pay attention to details, Tesoro. The concert was incredible, but what Simone remembered most was the intermission when Dante took her out to the terrace overlooking the Potomac River. The view was stunning, the city lights reflecting off the water, and Dante stood behind her with his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Do you see that building there? He pointed to a high-rise in the distance. I own the top 3 floors. Sometimes I stand in my office and look out at the city and feel like I have conquered the world. But tonight, standing here with you, I realize I have been looking at the wrong things. You are worth more than any building or business deal or territory. You are the only conquest that matters. Simone had turned in his arms and kissed him, and he had kissed her back with a passion that made her forget they were in public, forget everything except the feel of his hands on her waist and his lips on hers. Their third date was simpler but somehow more meaningful. Dante showed up at her bakery on a Sunday morning, her one day off, wearing jeans and a casual sweater that made him look younger, less dangerous. He had a picnic basket in hand and a smile that was almost boyish. Where are we going? Simone asked, curious. Somewhere I used to go when I first moved to America, Dante said. Somewhere that reminds me of home. He drove them to Shenandoah National Park, winding through mountain roads until they reached a scenic overlook that took Simone's breath away. The fall colors were at their peak, reds and golds and oranges painting the mountains in a way that looked almost unreal. They spread a blanket on the grass and Dante unpacked the basket, revealing homemade Italian food that he admitted his mother had prepared specifically for this date. "She wants to meet you," Dante said as they ate. "She has been asking about you since our first date. I told her about the beautiful, intelligent woman who runs a bakery and is not impressed by my money or my name." "What did she say?" "She said, 'Good. It is about time you met someone with sense.' Then she spent 3 hours cooking food for me to bring you and telling me all the ways I better not mess this up." Simone laughed. "I like your mother already. She will love you. Everyone who meets you loves you, Simone. You have this warmth about you, this genuine kindness that draws people in. It is one of the first things I noticed about you, the way you treat everyone in your bakery with the same respect and care, whether they are spending $5 or $50. Is that why you kept coming back? For the kindness?" Dante looked at her seriously. "I kept coming back because from the moment I saw you, I could not imagine being anywhere else. You are magnetic. Tesoro, you pulled me in and I stopped fighting it very quickly." They spent hours on that mountain, talking and kissing and watching the sun move across the sky. Dante told her about Sicily, about the small village where he grew up with views of the Mediterranean, about how his mother used to make him help in the kitchen and his father used to take him fishing. He told her about the loneliness of coming to America as a teenager, not speaking the language, missing home so badly it felt like a physical ache. And Simone told him about her own childhood, about growing up black in a mostly white small town, about the subtle and not so subtle racism she had experienced, about learning to be strong because she had no choice. She told him about her grandmother who had owned the building that now housed her bakery, who had taught her to bake and told her that a woman with a skill could never be completely powerless. She told him about the dreams she had for expanding her business, for maybe opening a second location someday, for teaching baking classes to kids in the community. "I want to help you do that," Dante said. "Let me invest in your business. Let me make those dreams happen." But Simone shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to build this myself. I need to know that my success is mine, that I earned it. Can you understand that?" Dante had looked at her with such pride in his eyes. "I understand completely," he said. "And I respect you even more for it. But when you are ready, when you have built what you want to build on your own terms, let me help you make it even bigger. Deal?" "Deal." By the 4th week, Dante had become part of Simone's routine, in a way that felt natural despite how quickly it had happened. He would stop by the bakery every afternoon around 3, timing his visits for after the lunch rush but before the after-school crowd. He would sit at his usual table and do work on his laptop, occasionally looking up to watch her work, to catch her eye and smile. Sometimes he would help her close up, washing dishes, or wiping down tables without being asked, rolling up his expensive sleeves and working alongside her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her employees were completely charmed by him. Michelle, who was 19 and studying business at community college, was in awe of his success and constantly asked him questions about entrepreneurship. Tara, who was 53 and had been working at the bakery since Simone opened it, treated him like a grandson, fussing over him and making sure he ate properly. And Dante was patient and kind with both of them, treating them with the same respect he showed Simone. But it was the nights that were really special. The times when they were alone and could be completely themselves with each other. They would have dinner at quiet restaurants where Dante knew the owners, places where they could sit in corner booths and talk for hours without being rushed. Or they would go back to his penthouse in New York and cook together, Dante teaching her traditional Italian recipes while she taught him southern dishes her grandmother had perfected. They would watch movies on his massive television, curled up together on the couch, and Simone would fall asleep against his chest, feeling safer than she had ever felt in her life. They talked about everything during those months. Politics and religion and philosophy, their fears and hopes and dreams. Dante told her more about his business, never giving her details that might make her complicit but being honest about the moral gray areas he operated in. He told her about the violence he had witnessed and committed, about the weight of being responsible for hundreds of people who depended on him for their livelihoods, about the enemies he had made, and the constant need to be vigilant. And Simone listened without judgment, asking questions to understand rather than criticize. She saw the complexity in what he did, saw that he was not simply a criminal, but someone operating in a system where legal and illegal were not always clear lines. She saw the care he took to minimize harm, to protect the innocent, to use his power for good when he could. It did not make what he did right, but it made him human, three-dimensional, someone she could love despite his flaws. But more than the grand gestures, it was the small things that made her fall. The way he showed up at her bakery every afternoon and insisted on helping her clean up, rolling up his expensive sleeves and washing dishes like it was the most natural thing in the world. The way he remembered that she took her coffee with cream and 2 sugars and always had it ready for her when he picked her up. The way he listened when she talked about her day, asking thoughtful questions and offering advice when she wanted it. The way he met her mother and charmed her completely within 10 minutes, sitting in her living room and discussing the history of Millbrook like he genuinely cared about this small town he had no connection to. He also started integrating her into his world, carefully and gradually. She met some of his associates, men who treated him with a respect that bordered on fear but who were unfailingly polite to her. She visited his penthouse in New York, a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows and art that probably cost more than her bakery building. She met his mother, Maria, a formidable Italian woman who looked at Simone with sharp eyes and then smiled and said in heavily accented English, "Finally, my son brings home a woman with substance." And Simone learned more about what Dante actually did. She learned that he controlled territory across 3 states, that he had hundreds of men working for him, that he resolved disputes and enforced agreements in ways that were technically illegal, but followed their own justice system. She learned that he was both feared and respected, that people came to him with problems they could not solve through legal channels, that he had power most people could not even imagine. It should have scared her more than it did. Maybe she was being naive, or maybe she was just too far gone to care. But Simone found that she could compartmentalize it. She did not ask about the details of his business, did not want to know specifics that might make her complicit. But she also could not deny that there was something compelling about being with someone so powerful, someone who could move through the world, bending it to his will, someone who looked at her and chose her out of all the options he had. They were careful in Millbrook, maintaining a public distance that protected Simone's reputation in a town where gossip spread faster than wildfire. Dante would visit her bakery, but they kept things professional where others could see. Their real relationship happened in Richmond and D.C. and New York, in places where they could be a couple without the entire town weighing in on it. But despite their caution, people started to notice. Her mother noticed and asked careful questions about the handsome Italian man who kept sending flowers. Her employees noticed and giggled about the way Dante looked at her. Her regular customers noticed and made knowing comments about how nice it was to see her finally dating someone. And then there was James Mitchell, the mayor's son and Millbrook's self-appointed golden boy. James had been trying to date Simone for 3 years, ever since he moved back to town after college. She had turned him down repeatedly, had made it clear she was not interested, but he had never quite taken no for an answer. He saw Dante as competition, and he did not like losing. It came to a head on a Saturday afternoon when Simone was at the farmer's market, buying fresh fruit for the bakery. Dante was in New York handling business, and Simone was enjoying a rare afternoon off. She was examining strawberries when James appeared beside her, too close, invading her personal space in a way that had always made her uncomfortable. "Simone," he said with his politician's smile, "I have been meaning to talk to you about this new boyfriend of yours. I do not have time for this, James." Simone moved away, putting distance between them. "He is not from here," James continued, following her. "Nobody knows anything about him. He shows up out of nowhere, starts sniffing around your bakery, and suddenly you are spending all your time running off to the city with him. Do not you think that is suspicious? My personal life is none of your business." Simone kept her voice low, aware that people were starting to stare. "It becomes my business when you are dating a criminal." James's voice was loud enough to carry, and Simone saw heads turn in their direction. "I did some research on your Dante Moretti. Do you know what he does? Do you know what kind of man he is?" Simone felt ice flood her veins. "Stop talking. Right now. He is Mafia, Simone. Connected to organized crime across the Northeast. He is dangerous, and you are either too naive to see it or you do not care. Either way, you are making a fool of yourself and embarrassing this town by association." The farmer's market had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, listening to James broadcast her private business to the entire community. Simone felt her face heat with humiliation and anger. "You have no right," she started. but James cut her off. I have every right to warn you when you are putting yourself in danger. That man is going to hurt you, Simone. And when he does, do not come crying to me or anyone else in this town. You were warned. He walked away, leaving Simone standing in the middle of the market with everyone staring at her. She heard the whispers start immediately, heard her name being passed from person to person along with speculation and judgment. By the time she made it back to her car, she was shaking with anger and shame. That evening, her mother called. "We need to talk," she said, and Simone knew that James's a little scene had made the rounds. She drove to her mother's house, prepared for a lecture, prepared to defend her choices. But her mother surprised her. Instead of judgment, she just asked one question. "Does he make you happy?" "Yes," Simone admitted. "He makes me happier than I have ever been." "Then that is all that matters." Her mother took her hand. "I raised you to be smart and careful, baby girl. If you have chosen this man knowing what he is, then I trust your judgment. Just promise me you will be safe." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. "I promise, Mama." When she told Dante about what had happened at the market, his reaction was controlled fury. He did not yell or rant. He simply said, "Give me his name," in a voice so cold it sent shivers down her spine. "No." Simone put her hand on his chest. "No, Dante. James is an idiot. But he is not worth whatever you are thinking about doing to him. Let it go. He humiliated you publicly." Dante's jaw was tight. "He disrespected you. That cannot stand. It already happened. Making it worse will not help. Please, for me, just leave it alone." Dante looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him struggling with himself, with his instinct to protect and avenge versus her explicit request to let it go. Finally, he nodded. "For you, I will let it go. But if he ever speaks to you like that again, he will answer to me." It was both a promise and a threat, and Simone knew he meant every word. After the incident at the market, things shifted in Millbrook. Some people were sympathetic, understanding that James had been out of line, but others were judgmental, making it clear they thought Simone was making a mistake by associating with someone like Dante. Her bakery business did not suffer. People still came in for her cakes and bread, but there was a new coolness in some interactions, a new distance from people she had known her entire life. It hurt more than Simone wanted to admit. She had built her life in this town, had thought she would always belong here. Realizing that her relationship with Dante was making her an outsider in her own community was painful in ways she had not anticipated. Dante noticed her withdrawal, noticed how she was quieter, how she flinched when he sent flowers to the bakery, how she seemed uncomfortable with any public display of their relationship. 4 months into their relationship, he brought it up over dinner at his penthouse in New York. "You are pulling away from me," he said quietly. "Tell me why." Simone looked at him across the table, at the concern in his eyes, and felt her throat tighten. "I am not pulling away. I am just dealing with the reality of what it means to be with you, which is that my life is getting smaller. People in Millbrook are judging me, pulling back from me, treating me differently. My home is not feeling like home anymore, and I do not know how to fix that." "Then leave Millbrook." Dante said it like it was obvious. "Move here, to New York, or I will buy you a house wherever you want. You can open a new bakery, start fresh somewhere that is not so small-minded." "I do not want to leave Millbrook." Simone's voice broke. "That town is my home. My mother is there. My business is there. My entire life is there. I should not have to give that up just because some people cannot mind their own business. Then what do you want from me?" Dante's voice was frustrated. "Because I cannot fix small-town gossip, Simone. I cannot make people accept me or accept us. The only thing I can do is give you options, give you a way out if that is what you need." "I do not know what I need." Simone put her head in her hands. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe I was not thinking clearly. "Do not." Dante's voice was sharp. "Do not convince yourself that what we have is not real just because other people cannot understand it. I love you, Simone. I love you with everything I am. And I know you love me too, even if you have not." He said it yet. Simone looked up at him, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. He was right. She did love him, had probably loved him for months now, even though she had been too afraid to say it. But love did not solve everything, did not make the complications of their relationship disappear. "I do love you," she said quietly. But I do not know if love is enough. Then let me make it enough. Dante moved around the table and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Marry me, Simone. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. Marry me and let me take care of you. Let me build a life with you that is bigger than Millbrook and the opinions of people who do not matter. Marry me and I promise you that I will spend every day making sure you never regret it. Simone stared at him, her heart pounding. They had been together 4 months. It was too soon, too fast, too crazy. But looking into his eyes, seeing the love and determination there, part of her wanted to say yes. Wanted to take this leap and trust that they would figure everything else out. But there was another part of her, the practical part that had kept her safe her entire life, that could not ignore reality. She was 28 years old with a business and a life she had built from nothing. He was 35 with a criminal empire and a world she barely understood. They came from completely different places, wanted different things. How could a marriage possibly work? I cannot, she heard herself say, and watched his face fall. Dante, I love you, but I cannot marry you. Not like this. Not when I do not even know what my life would look like as your wife. Not when everything is so complicated and uncertain. I am sorry, but no. The silence that followed was deafening. Dante slowly released her hands and stood, his expression shuddering into something cold and distant. I see, he said quietly. I misunderstood what this was between us. That is not fair. You did not misunderstand. I love you. But love and marriage are not the same thing, and I am not ready to make that commitment when everything feels so unstable. What would make you feel stable? What do you need from me that I have not already given you? Simone did not have an answer for that. She did not know what she needed, only knew that marriage felt like too much too fast. I need time, she finally said. Can you give me that? Dante looked at her for a long moment, and she could not read the expression on his face. Of course, he said with a flatness that scared her more than anger would have. Take all the time you need. He drove her back to Millbrook that night in complete silence, and when he dropped her off at her house, he did not kiss her goodbye, did not make plans to see her again. He just said goodnight and drove away. And Simone stood on her porch watching his taillights disappear and wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. For the next week, she did not hear from him. No calls, no texts, no flowers sent to the bakery. It was like he had disappeared from her life completely, and the absence hurt more than she had imagined it would. She tried to tell herself it was for the best, that she had made the right choice, that it was better to end things now before they got even more complicated. But she missed him with an ache that felt physical, missed his presence in her bakery every afternoon, missed his voice and his touch and the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. On the 8th day after their fight, James Mitchell showed up at her bakery just before closing. He had a smug expression that made Simone's skin crawl. I heard your boyfriend left town, he said, leaning against her counter. Guess he finally realized you were not worth the trouble. Get out, James. Simone's voice was cold. I am closing and I do not want you here. I also heard he made you quite an offer before he left. Marriage, was it? And you turned him down. James shook his head mockingly. That was smart, Simone. You dodged a bullet with that one. I said get out. Simone moved toward the door, intending to physically show him out if necessary. But James was not done. You think you are too good for this town now. You think you are special because some criminal gave you attention. But you are just the same girl you have always been. Simone Carter. Small town, small time, never going to be anything more than a bakery owner in a nowhere town. Before Simone could respond, the door opened, and Dante walked in. He was wearing a suit, looking as polished and dangerous as he had the first day she met him, and his eyes were ice cold as they landed on James. You, Dante said quietly, and there was so much menace in that one word that James actually took a step back. You are the one who humiliated her at the market. I told you what would happen if you spoke to her like that again. I did not touch her. James's bravado was crumbling. I was just having a conversation. You were disrespecting the woman I love, and that is something I cannot allow. Dante moved closer, and despite being roughly the same height as James, he seemed to tower over him. Now you have a choice. You can apologize to her right now, sincerely and completely, or you can deal with me. What will it be? James looked between Dante and Simone, his face pale. "I am sorry," he muttered. "I was out of line." Louder. "And to her, not to me." James turned to Simone, and she could see the fear in his eyes. "I am sorry, Simone. I should not have said those things to you, not at the market, and not today. It was wrong and disrespectful. Now get out. And if I hear that you have bothered her again, if I hear that you have even looked at her the wrong way, I will not be this generous again. Are we clear?" Crystal. James practically ran out of the bakery, and Simone watched him go with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "You did not have to do that," she said, turning to Dante. "I could have handled him. I know you could have, but you should not have to." Dante's voice was rough. "You are mine to protect, even if you do not want to be mine in the way I want you to be." "Dante, I have something to tell you." He cut her off. "And I need you to listen without interrupting, because if I do not say this now, I never will." Simone nodded, her heart pounding. "When you rejected my proposal, I was angry. No, I was furious. I do not handle rejection well, Tesoro. It is not something I have ever had to deal with much in my life. So I did something impulsive, something you are probably going to be very mad at me for." "What did you do?" Dante pulled out a folder from his briefcase and handed it to her. "I bought Millbrook." Simone stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You what?" "I bought it. All of it. The main street businesses, the residential properties, the farmland surrounding the town. Over the past week, I have been acquiring every piece of real estate in Millbrook that was for sale or that I could convince to sell. As of this morning, I own 87% of this town." Simone opened the folder with shaking hands and saw page after page of property deeds, all with Dante Moretti or one of his shell corporations listed as the new owner. The hardware store, the diner, the post office building, dozens of houses, and there, at the bottom of the stack, the deed to the building that housed Sweet Haven Bakery. "You bought my bakery building," she whispered. "I bought everything," Dante corrected. "And I did it because I was angry and hurt and I wanted to prove a point. I wanted to show you that I could, that my reach was that far, that there was nowhere you could go where I could not follow if I wanted to. It was petty and possessive and absolutely insane." "You are right. It is insane." Simone's hands were shaking. "What did you think this would accomplish, Dante? Did you think I would change my mind about marrying you because you bought my town? Did you think I would be impressed by this display of power?" "No." Dante's voice was quiet. "I think I wanted you to understand that I am not walking away, that rejecting my proposal does not mean I am giving up on us. I bought this town, Simone, and now I am going to fix it." "Fix it?" "Yes." Dante moved closer, his eyes intense on hers. "You said Millbrook is your home, that you do not want to leave it. So I'm going to make it better for you. I am going to bring in new businesses, revitalize Main Street, create jobs and opportunities that this town has not seen in decades. I am going to invest in the schools and the infrastructure and everything else that has been neglected because no one with resources cared enough to help. And I am going to do it because you love this place, because you deserve to live somewhere that reflects the incredible person you are." Simone stared at him, her mind reeling. "You cannot just buy a town and expect that to fix our problems." "I know, but I can remove obstacles. I can make it so that people like James do not have power over you anymore. I can create a community that is more open-minded, more diverse, more welcoming. I can bring in enough new people and new energy that the old gossips do not matter anymore." Dante took her hands. "I am not asking you to marry me again, not yet. I am asking you to let me prove that I can give you everything you need. Let me spend the next 6 months making Millbrook into the kind of place where we can both be happy. And then, if you still do not want to marry me, I will sell everything and walk away. But give me this chance, Simone. Please." Simone looked at him, at the vulnerability beneath the confidence, at the man who had just bought an entire town because he could not stand the thought of losing her. It was the most insane, over-the-top, absolutely ridiculous romantic gesture she had ever heard of. It was also completely Dante. "You are out of your mind," she said, but she was smiling, despite herself. "Is that a yes? It is a maybe. Show me what you are going to do with this town. Show me that you actually care about making it better, and not just marking your territory. And if you can do that, if you can prove that this is about more than just your ego, then maybe I will reconsider your proposal." The smile that spread across Dante's face was brilliant. "That is all I need, Tesoro. You will see. I am going to make Millbrook the jewel of Virginia. All for you." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Simone kissed him back with everything she had, finally admitting to herself that she was all in, that there was no walking away from this man, no matter how crazy his grand gestures were. True to his word, Dante spent the next 6 months transforming Millbrook. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, with renovations to the buildings he owned on Main Street. The old hardware store that had been closed for 2 years was gutted and rebuilt, emerging as a beautiful dollars boutique that sold artisan goods from local craftspeople. The owner was a woman from Richmond named Patricia, who had dreamed of having her own shop but could never afford the startup costs. Dante gave her a 5-year lease at below market rate and a small business loan with generous terms. Within a month, her shop was thriving, drawing customers from surrounding towns who had heard about the unique handmade jewelry and pottery and textiles. The space next to Simone's bakery, which had been a dingy insurance office that closed when the owner retired, became a coffee shop. But not just any coffee shop. Dante brought in Marcus and Jennifer Chen, a young couple who had been running a successful food truck in Richmond and dreaming of expanding. He renovated the space to their exact specifications, installed top-of-the-line equipment, and gave them the keys. Within weeks, the coffee shop was packed every morning with locals and newcomers alike, all raving about the house-roasted beans and the homemade pastries that Jennifer made using recipes she had learned from her grandmother in Taiwan. Then came the bigger changes. The old textile mill on the edge of town had been abandoned for 15 years, a hulking brick building that was slowly crumbling and becoming dangerous. Most people assumed it would eventually be torn down. Instead, Dante bought it and hired a development company that specialized in historic preservation. They spent 4 months carefully restoring the building, keeping its industrial character while updating it for modern living. When they finished, the mill had been converted into 60 loft apartments, most of them affordable housing with a few market-rate units mixed in. The apartments were beautiful, with exposed brick and high ceilings and large windows that flooded the spaces with light. Dante personally approved every tenant application, prioritizing young families and creative professionals and people who would bring new energy to Millbrook. He also made sure to rent to several families from marginalized communities, knowing that Millbrook needed more diversity if it was going to shed its small-town narrow-mindedness. But the mill was just the beginning. Dante funded a complete overhaul of the town's playground and park, which had been in disrepair for years. He hired a landscape architect who designed a space that was both beautiful and functional, with new equipment for kids, walking trails for adults, gardens planted with native species, and even a small amphitheater for community events. The playground equipment was state-of-the-art and accessible, designed so that children with disabilities could play alongside their peers. There were benches in shaded areas and water fountains, and even a small cafe kiosk where people could buy snacks and drinks. The investment in the schools was perhaps what won over the most skeptics. Dante created an education foundation and seeded it with $2 million. Money that was used to buy new computers and tablets for every student, to repair the aging school buildings, to fund arts and music programs that had been cut years ago due to budget constraints. He also created a scholarship program that would give 5 Millbrook High School graduates full rides to state universities every year, priority given to students from low-income families or underrepresented communities. When the school board asked why he was doing this, Dante said simply, "Education is the foundation of everything. If we want Millbrook to thrive, we need to invest in our children. They are the future of this community." He also created a community fund that gave small business loans to anyone with a solid business plan. No credit checks required, no collateral needed. The loans ranged from $5,000 to $50,000, with below-market interest rates and flexible repayment terms. The only requirement was that applicants had to present a detailed plan and attend free business classes that Dante funded at the community center. Within 3 months, 10 new businesses opened in Millbrook. A bookstore run by a retired English teacher who had always dreamed of owning her own shop. A yoga studio started by a former corporate lawyer who had moved to Millbrook to escape the stress of city life. A small brewery opened by 2 brothers who had been making beer in their basement for years and finally had the capital to go commercial. A pet grooming salon, a vintage clothing store, a family-run Mexican restaurant that served authentic food the owners had grown up eating in Texas. And slowly, incredibly, Millbrook transformed. Main Street, which had been half-empty storefronts and struggling businesses, was now bustling with activity 7 days a week. The town that had been dying, losing population every year as young people left for better opportunities elsewhere, suddenly had a waiting list for housing. People were moving to Millbrook from Richmond and D.C. and even Northern Virginia, drawn by the lower cost of living, the sense of community, and the opportunities that Dante's investments had created. The demographic shift was dramatic. Where Millbrook had once been overwhelmingly white, now there was real diversity. Young Black and Latino families moved into the Mill apartments. Asian American business owners opened shops on Main Street. A Muslim family bought one of the old farmhouses on the edge of town and started a halal butcher shop that quickly became popular. The town that had always been insular and suspicious of outsiders was becoming cosmopolitan, and while some of the old guard grumbled, they were increasingly outnumbered by people who saw the changes as positive. Through it all, Dante made himself visible but not overbearing. He attended town council meetings and listened to community concerns. He funded projects that residents requested, like better street lighting and improved sidewalks. He hired locally whenever possible, giving jobs to people who had been unemployed or underemployed. And he made it clear that his investments were not about control but about building something sustainable that would outlast his involvement. Most importantly, he gave credit where credit was due. When the local paper did a story about the town's revitalization, Dante made sure they interviewed the business owners and community leaders, not him. He positioned himself as a facilitator, someone who had the resources to make things happen but was not the hero of the story. The real heroes, he said in the one interview he gave, are the people of Millbrook who had the vision to see what their town could become and the courage to embrace change. But everyone knew that none of it would have happened without him. And as much as some people wanted to resent his outsized influence, it was hard to stay angry at someone who was genuinely making life better for everyone. Simone watched all of this unfold with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. She saw Dante's genuine commitment to improving Millbrook, saw how much time and energy he was pouring into the project. But she also worried about what it meant, about whether he was doing this for the right reasons or just to win an argument. One evening, about 3 months into the revitalization project, she confronted him about it. They were at his penthouse in New York, eating dinner that Dante had cooked, when she finally said what had been on her mind. "Are you doing all of this just to prove a point?" she asked. "To show me that you can buy your way into getting what you want?" Dante put down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Is that what you think? That this is all some elaborate manipulation?" "I do not know what to think." Simone's voice was frustrated. "You bought my town, Dante. You spent, what, $10 million? 20? All because I said no to a proposal. That is not normal. That is not healthy. You are right. It is not normal." Dante leaned back in his chair. "When you rejected me, I was angry. No, I was furious. I have built an empire from nothing, Simone. I am used to getting what I want, used to problems being solvable if I throw enough resources at them. And then you said no to me, and I realized that I could not simply buy my way into your heart. It was humbling and infuriating in equal measure. So you decided to buy my town instead," Simone said dryly. "I decided to remove the obstacles that were keeping us apart. You said you could not marry me because your life felt unstable, because Millbrook was becoming uncomfortable, because you did not know what your future would look like. So I fixed those problems. I made Millbrook stable and prosperous. I created a community where we could both feel welcome. I showed you what your future could look like if you took a chance on us. By taking over my hometown, by investing in your hometown." Dante's voice was firm. "Everything I have done has been good for Millbrook, Simone. Every business I have helped start, every renovation I have funded, every family that has moved here, all of it has made the town better. Yes, I did it because I love you, and I want you to be happy. But I also did it because I could, because I have resources that can make a real difference, and because those people deserved someone to believe in them and their community. Can you honestly tell me that Millbrook is worse off now than it was 6 months ago?" Simone wanted to argue, wanted to find fault with his logic, but she could not. Millbrook was undeniably better. Main Street was thriving. The schools had resources they had never had before. People had opportunities they had never imagined. Her own bakery was doing better than ever. benefiting from the increased foot traffic and the new customers who had moved to town. No, she admitted. Millbrook is better. You have done incredible things here. Then why are you still angry? Because it scares me. Simone's voice broke. It scares me how too much power you have, how easily you can reshape reality to suit your needs. What happens if we do get married and then things do not work out? What happens if you decide to leave? Will you take all of this away? Will you punish the town for my mistakes? Dante stood and moved to her side of the table, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands. Tesoro, listen to me very carefully. I would never punish innocent people for problems between us. Never. The investments I have made in Millbrook are permanent. Even if you decided tomorrow that you never wanted to see me again, those businesses would still operate. Those scholarships would still be funded. Those apartments would still provide housing. I set everything up through trusts and foundations that are independent of my personal life. Millbrook's future does not depend on our relationship. You did that? Simone searched his eyes. You made sure the town would be okay even if we fell apart? I did. Because despite what you might think, I am not trying to hold your hometown hostage. I am trying to build something sustainable and good. And yes, I am doing it in part because I love you, and I want you to be happy. But I am also doing it because it is the right thing to do, because I have the ability to make a positive difference, and so I should. Simone felt tears slide down her cheeks. I am sorry, she whispered. I should have known you would think of that. You are not the kind of man who would hurt innocent people just to prove a point. No, I am not. Dante wiped her tears with his thumbs. I am the kind of man who burns down the world for the people I love, but I am also the kind of man who tries to rebuild something better from the ashes. You have seen me do this, Simone. You have watched me change Millbrook. Have I been cruel? Have I been destructive? Or have I been careful and thoughtful and focused on helping people? You have been amazing, Simone admitted. I have watched you with the business owners, listened to how you talk to people, seen how you treat everyone with respect. You have not been a tyrant. You have been a benefactor. Because that is who I am trying to be for you. Not someone who controls you or manipulates you, but someone who loves you enough to want to make your life better in whatever ways I can. 6 months after he bought the town, Dante threw a festival in the renovated park. It was ostensibly to celebrate Millbrook's revitalization and to thank everyone who had worked on the various projects, but Simone suspected it was really an excuse to gather the entire community together and show them what they had accomplished collectively. The festival was beautiful. There were food vendors from all the new restaurants, including Marcus and Jennifer's coffee shop and the Mexican restaurant, and even Sweet Haven, where Simone and her expanded team of 5 employees sold cupcakes and cookies and her famous cinnamon rolls. There was live music on the new stage in the amphitheater, a mix of local bands and performers Dante had brought in from Richmond. There were activities for kids, face painting and balloon animals, and a petting zoo that drew squeals of delight. There was even a beer garden sponsored by the new brewery, where adults could relax and socialize while their kids played. The weather cooperated perfectly, a warm autumn day with clear skies and just enough breeze to keep things comfortable. By mid-afternoon, it seemed like the entire town had turned out, old residents and new mixing together in a way that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Simone stood at the Sweet Haven booth, watching people laugh and dance and enjoy themselves, and felt her heart swell with love for this community that had always been her home. Dante found her as the sun was starting to set, the sky turning pink and gold behind the mountains. He was wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt, dressed down in a way he rarely was, and he looked happy and relaxed. He pulled her away from the booth, leaving her employees to handle the last of the customers, and led her to a quiet corner of the park where they had some privacy. There is something different about you tonight, Simone said, studying his face. You are nervous. I have never seen you nervous. I am terrified, Dante admitted, because I am about to ask you something and I do not know what you will say. Simone's heart started to pound. Dante, 6 months ago, I made you a promise. He took both her hands in his. I told you I would make Millbrook into the kind of place where we could both be happy, where our life together could flourish. I told you to give me 6 months to prove that I was serious, that I could give you everything you needed. Have I done that, Tesoro? Have I kept my promise? Simone looked around at the park full of happy people, at the town that had been transformed from dying to thriving. at the community that Dante had helped build through his resources and vision and genuine care. "Yes," she said softly. "You have done more than I ever imagined possible. You have given Millbrook a future it would not have had otherwise. Then I am asking you to give me what I have wanted from the moment I met you." Dante lowered himself to one knee, and Simone's breath caught as he pulled out a ring box. The ring inside was stunning, a large diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a setting that was both elegant and timeless. "Simone Carter, I love you more than I have ever loved anyone or anything. You are my heart, my reason for waking up in the morning, my purpose. I know I am not always easy to be with. I know my world is complicated and sometimes dangerous, but I swear to you that I will spend the rest of my life protecting you, loving you, cherishing you, making sure you have everything you need to be happy and fulfilled. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the mother of my children? Will you build a life with me that is bigger than anything either of us could create alone?" Simone looked at him kneeling in the grass, this powerful man making himself vulnerable for her, and she felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Dante, I will marry you." He stood and slipped the ring on her finger, a beautiful diamond that caught the light from the setting sun, and then he was kissing her as the people in the park realized what was happening and started to cheer. Simone kissed him back, pouring 6 months of love and longing and gratitude into it, and when they finally broke apart, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "You bought me a town," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "That is the most ridiculous thing anyone has ever done for love. Is it working?" Dante's smile was hopeful. "Yes, it is definitely working." They were married 2 months later in a ceremony that was both intimate and grand. Close family and friends gathered in the renovated park in Millbrook, the town that had brought them together and that now felt like it belonged to both of them. Simone's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Dante's mother gave a blessing in Italian that made half the guests cry, even though they did not understand the words. And when they were pronounced husband and wife, the entire town erupted in applause. That is the story of Simone Carter, the woman who rejected a marriage proposal from a Mafia boss and watched him buy her entire town just to prove his love was worth reconsidering. Her story proves that sometimes the most extravagant romantic gestures come from the most unexpected places, that real love is about more than words and promises, and that the right person will move mountains, or in this case, buy small towns, to make you happy. Simone thought she was protecting herself by saying no. Instead, she gave Dante the opportunity to show her exactly how far he would go for love, and in doing so, she found a partner who was willing to bend the world, itself to make her smile. Years later, Simone would stand in the expanded Sweet Haven bakery, now employing 12 people and shipping baked goods across Virginia, and marvel at how her life had changed. The bakery had grown from her small operation into a regional destination, with people driving hours to taste her famous cakes and pastries. She had published a cookbook that had become a regional bestseller, had been featured in Southern Living magazine, had even been approached about a Food Network show, though she turned it down because she preferred focusing on her community rather than chasing fame. She would watch the children playing in the park that Dante had built, would see the diverse, thriving community that Millbrook had become, and feel grateful for every decision that had led her here. The town she loved was not just surviving but flourishing, home to over 5,000 people now. A place where old and new mixed seamlessly, where opportunities existed that had been unimaginable just a few years ago. The Mill apartments were full with a waiting list, and Dante had recently funded a second housing development on the other side of town, this one focused on senior living so that elderly residents did not have to leave Millbrook when they needed more support. The Main Street businesses were all profitable and established, with new ones opening regularly as entrepreneurs saw the potential in this small town that had become something special. The schools consistently received top ratings in the state. The scholarship program had sent 30 students to college with full rides, and the community center offered programs for everyone from toddlers to seniors. And she would remember the day she said no, the day she rejected Dante's first proposal, and realize it had been the right decision at the right time. Not because they were not meant to be together, but because saying no gave Dante the space to prove that he was not just offering her a ring and a promise. He was offering her the world, reshaped to fit her dreams, transformed to make her happy. He was offering her a partnership where her needs and desires mattered as much as his, where her independence was respected even as he used his resources to support her goals. Their marriage was not without challenges. There were arguments about boundaries, about Dante's tendency to solve problems with money and influence when Simone wanted to handle things herself. There were difficult conversations about the parts of his business that still operated in moral gray areas, about the violence that sometimes touched their lives despite his best efforts to keep it away from her. There were moments when Simone questioned whether she had made the right choice, moments when the weight of being married to someone so powerful felt overwhelming. But there were far more moments of joy, of partnership, of genuine love and respect. Dante never stopped looking at Simone like she was the most precious thing in his world. He never stopped finding ways to surprise her, to show her that his love was not something that could be contained by conventional gestures or limited by time. Their love was a living thing that grew and evolved, that weathered challenges and emerged stronger. On their first anniversary, he funded a scholarship program at Millbrook High in her name, specifically for students interested in culinary arts. On their second, he surprised her by flying her entire extended family to Italy for a month-long vacation where they toured the country and ate at every Michelin-starred restaurant they could find. On their third, he commissioned a documentary about small-town revitalization, using Millbrook as the central example and positioning Simone as one of the key leaders who had helped guide the transformation. On their fourth, he gave her the deed to a building in Richmond, where she could open a second bakery location, fulfilling a dream she had mentioned once 2 years earlier, and he had never forgotten. And Simone loved him back just as fiercely. She supported his efforts to transition more of his business into legitimate enterprises, using her business acumen to help him identify opportunities and make connections. She gave him the family and stability he had never had growing up, creating a home that was warm and welcoming, a place where he could be vulnerable and soft instead of always having to be strong. She challenged him when he was being too controlling, supported him when he was struggling with difficult decisions, and loved him through all of his flaws and complications. Their son Anthony was born 2 years after their wedding, a beautiful baby boy with Dante's dark eyes and Simone's smile. Their daughter Maria, named after Dante's mother, arrived 3 years later, fierce and funny and completely fearless. The children grew up knowing they were loved beyond measure, that they had the security of a tight-knit community and the opportunities that came from their father's wealth and their mother's wisdom. They grew up understanding that power came with responsibility, that their privilege meant they had a duty to help others, that family was about more than blood. It was about showing up and caring and choosing to be there for people. They were not perfect. They had arguments and disagreements and moments when Simone had to remind Dante that loving someone did not mean controlling them, when Dante had to remind Simone that accepting help was not the same as giving up independence. But they worked through it, together, because they had both learned that real love was not about the big romantic gestures or the grand declarations. It was about showing up every day, choosing each other every day, building something together that was bigger than either of them alone. If intense love stories captivate you, if you believe that the right person will rewrite reality itself to keep you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that love is not always convenient or sensible, but it is always worth fighting for. What did you think of Simone and Dante's story? Have you ever said no to something and watched someone completely change the game to change your mind? Would you have given Dante a second chance after he bought your town? Or would that have been too much? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected love, grand gestures, and relationships that refuse to follow the rules. Remember, sometimes saying no is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is the beginning of something even bigger, something that proves that the right person will not walk away when things get complicated. They will find a way to make it work, even if that way involves buying an entire town. Thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next story.